Hello, and welcome to Shadow Me Next, a podcast where I take you into and behind the scenes of the medical world to provide you with a deeper understanding of the human side of medicine. I'm Ashley, a physician assistant, medical editor, clinical preceptor, and the creator of Shadow Me Next. It is my pleasure to introduce you to incredible members of the healthcare field and uncover their unique stories, the joys and challenges they face, and what drives them in their careers. It's access you want and stories you need. Whether you're a pre-health student or simply curious about the healthcare field, I invite you to join me as we take a conversational and personal look into the lives and minds of leaders in medicine. I don't want you to miss a single one of these conversations, so make sure that you subscribe to this podcast, which will automatically notify you when new episodes are dropped, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Shadow Me Next, where we will review highlights from this conversation and where I'll give you sneak previews of our upcoming guests. Sometimes the road to medicine starts with a noble calling. Other times, it starts with a thermometer. Jenny Lytle's journey into nursing began with a childhood fascination, but over the last 30 years, most of it spent in hospice care, she's found a far deeper purpose, being present with patients and families in their most vulnerable moments. In this conversation, Jenny shares what decades in hospice have taught her about life, loss, and the power of presence. She opens up about misconceptions around hospice, the unexpected joy and humor that can exist alongside grief, and why quality of care means something different to everyone. We also talk about a deeply personal turning point when Jenny's mom, who's also a nurse, passed away unexpectedly, and how that loss sparked her mission to help caregivers care for themselves through her book, Self-Care Isn't Selfish, and The Becoming Method. If you've ever wondered what it takes to thrive in such an emotionally demanding field, or how to keep serving others without emptying yourself, this episode will leave you with insight, encouragement, and maybe even a new perspective on what it means to truly care. This is Shadow Me Next with Jenny Lytle. Please keep in mind that the content of this podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional medical advice. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. This is Shadow Me Next with Jenny Lytle. Jenny, thank you so much for joining us on Shadow Me Next today. You have been in healthcare as a nurse for over 30 years. You have a wealth of information and really interesting things that will apply not just to people interested in nursing, but people across the board of medicine, which is fabulous. So thanks for joining us today.
Oh, Ashley, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it'll be a great conversation. So let's go way back, Jenny. It's been 30 years. What initially drew you to medicine? And how did you choose nursing?
Well, I would love to say that it's like some really noble thing, but really the original thing was the thermometer. I was sick a lot when I was young. I spent some time in the hospital and I had some lung issues and everything's good now, but I loved the thermometers and, the little holster kind and really like the kind that people still use now. And I just thought that was really cool. And so that started my, my nursing journey. I thought I want one of those. And then throughout high school and stuff, I thought maybe I want to do something more mental health related. I was thinking psychology, psychiatry, somewhere in there. But then I got into a not great relationship and I decided, this is really a bad thing. I didn't recognize that at that time, but so let's just make it all come together as quickly as possible. So I wanted to go to LPN school because my mom was like, okay, before you get married, I want you to finish college. And I'm like, okay, it's a year program. It'll work. And thankfully did not marry the guy, did go, went to school with my mom. And so that's what started my my nursing career. Probably
So
not the
cool.
most traditional.
No, I love it though, because I think there's so many things in our life that leads us to where we're at. And sometimes you don't realize it in the moment that shift is happening until, somebody asks you on a podcast 30 years later, hey, how'd you get into nursing? So
Right.
that's a really neat story. I love the visual of the thermometer. So Jenny, you work in hospice now, which
Yes.
is I have worked with people in hospice before, and our hospice nurses are just that you guys are saints. You are incredible. Did you always know that you wanted to work with people nearing the end of their life and kind of navigate that path with them?
Not at all. I I had known of hospice, and I think my grandma was technically in hospice, like at the hospital, but she died when I was 4.5, so I don't have memories of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew the word hospice, but I had a lot of misconceptions, like I feel like a lot of people have had, where I thought it was just for people with cancer and people who were like dying today or tomorrow. And I actually got into hospice because I had done long-term care and some clinic work and things like that. But my close friend, her dad had lung cancer, and he had been going through treatment and stuff. And then he woke up one morning and had a big change, went to the ER, and they sent him home with 2 weeks to live on hospice.
Oh gosh.
And they were a pretty non-medical family. And so I spent a lot of time over there for those 2 weeks, and I got to see what hospice was like, coming into the home. And I thought, this is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
To not be hooked up to a bunch of machines, to be able to go outside and smoke and have all of his friends
Yes.
there and all of that. I thought this is kind of cool. I think I want to do this. But side note, I'm the type of person that I want to do everything. Like I see a help wanted sign at the gas station. I'm like, well, that looks fun. So
Feel
I
that,
let it
Jenny.
sit.
I
Yeah.
feel that.
Do you?
Yes.
So I let it sit a little bit, and that was in July of 2005, and I started for working for that same hospice in October of 2005. So it's
Oh my
been almost
gosh.
20 years in hospice.
That's
So,
incredible. And it's funny now that you say that, it's jogging my memory. And so many of the hospice nurses that I know have literally been in it for decades, decades. So
mhm.
Jenny, there must be something about it that is not just miserably sad and depressing all the time, or else I can't imagine you want to stay in it for decades. Is it, generally speaking, just, you mentioned misconceptions. Maybe we'll ask about that. What are some of the misconceptions? And can you clarify that for us? Because surely it's not always incredibly sad.
Right. It's not. And that's the thing that people have that. And I used to love when I would have students that would come and shadow me,
Yes,
in
it's the
person,
best.
because it was, they would come in, and some of them were like, okay, you know what? My grandma had hospice and I'm really excited about this. And most of them were like, I'm here because I have to be. I know I'm not going to do this. I don't want any part of it. And it was like, okay, well, thanks for the honesty. We'll see how it is. And what all of them realized is like it's not just all gloom and doom.
Mm-hmm.
It's parts of it, it's funny sometimes, and it's fun, and it's such a privilege to be able to be with people, with patients, with families in, a lot of times a home setting, whether that's in their private home or wherever they call home, an assisted living, a nursing home, whatever, being
Mm-hmm.
able to be there with them in their hardest times, in their most vulnerable, maybe the time when their house is the messiest
Mm-hmm.
because it's not a priority, and being able to be there alongside people in that space it's it's such a privilege, and it's an honor to be able to be there. And one of the things that I really do love about hospice is that you're able to be with the patient and the family one on one in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. Now, you may have, your phone may be blowing up, that you have 20 other people to go see. But in that moment, you're there with them. And that's not the case in a lot of other settings. So
That's
that's,
true.
I think, one of the biggest misconception is that it's all sad. Another one is that it's giving up. Well,
Oh
if somebody's
yeah.
on hospice, they're just giving up. Either the patient and family themselves are giving up on treatment, or maybe the doctor feels like they're giving up. And that's a tough one because, or like they failed somehow. The
Mm.
reality is we're all going to die. And, there's a lot of things that we wish we could be, could be different. And we wish that it was later or we had longer or, that there was different circumstances. But there are people who don't want any kind of treatment, and that's
Hmm.
okay. The same as there are people who will never want hospice. They are going to want to do everything that they can do, fight it up until their last breath, and that's okay too. It's just understanding, what you're saying yes or no to. And that's one of the big things with hospice. It's not about giving up. It's about changing your focus, changing your goals of care, and deciding, I want to have the best quality of life for however long I have, and sometimes that's less, and sometimes that's more. It depends.
Options are a beautiful thing. And I think they can be overwhelming, but
Mhm.
thank God we have them because different people have different preferences. And those
Absolutely.
preferences are going to lead them to different options. You mentioned it so briefly, but it really struck me when you're describing the patient that maybe he just wanted to go outside and smoke with his friends. You can't
Hmm.
do that when you're in the hospital.
Right,
They don't let
right.
you. First of all, you have to walk across the street because you can't do it in the
Exactly.
hospital. It's also you're connected to oxygen and tubes and lines, and
Right,
your friends have to pay for parking before they can even come up to your room to get you to go grab a smoke. So, and
right.
not we all know that smoking is bad, but when you are facing the end of your life,
Mhm.
we are going to find comfort in a variety of different things. And if that is what you have spent your whole life doing, then so
Right,
be it, and
right.
thank God that we have hospice nurses like you to help support these people as they take their final steps in this world to be more comfortable and to explore their options and to enjoy their options and focus on the things that matter, things like that. Instead of, like you said, instead of just being hooked up to lines and tubes in the hospital room.
Right,
I
right.
don't,
And having people who really are very adamant that, well, you shouldn't be smoking. This is what got you here. Like they know that. And
yeah,
and
they
that's I mean,
do.
and it's that way with family members sometimes, well, he still wants to smoke and that's it's not going to matter.
Now, Jenny and I did not get a chance to discuss a quality question, but this topic that she brings up would make an excellent interview question. When a patient's choices go against your personal beliefs or medical advice, how do you respond? This isn't a textbook question. It's real life. As a hospice nurse in Jenny's world, quality of life looks different for every patient. Sometimes that means supporting decisions you wouldn't make for yourself. Could you do it? How would you explain your reasoning in a professional school interview? Keep in mind that there's more interview prep, such as mock interviews and personal statement review, over on shadowmenext.com. There, you'll find amazing resources to help you as you prepare to answer your own quality questions.
And that's what I tell the patients and the families. Like, look, at this point, it may be, it may make it a little bit harder for him to breathe in the moment, or it may not. But in reality, like it's not going to make any difference in terms of, length of life. But,
Right.
you know, if he hasn't quit in the past 50 years, he probably doesn't want to go through the withdrawal of that right now,
The withdrawals alone. Yes,
Right.
exactly. Exactly.
When it comes to the end of your life, I don't know. I think it's easy to be healthy and feel like
Mm,
you've got a lot of life left and feel like you know what people should be doing.
yep.
And so hospice is a little more about, just letting people figure that out for themselves and do what they need to do to live however long they have with as much dignity and joy and peace as possible.
Exactly. I love that so much. And I think that is it's such a cool thing that we have access to. Like you said, this is something that everybody is going to walk through one way or the other. And allowing options is it's
Hmm.
so important. So, Jenny, tell us, what does a typical day look like for you? You touched on it a little bit. You might be seeing one patient and in your mind, you have a bunch of other ones, but what does, start to finish, what does it
Hmm.
look like?
Well, so for me, my role is a little different than it used to be. I've done a lot of different roles in hospice. And so right now I work after hours on call. So hopefully my role looks like I'm sleeping. Um, my role looks like I go to bed at about 8 p.m. because I go on call at 11 and I want to get a nap in case I get called right at 11. But then, but sometimes like last night, for instance, I was on call from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. This morning, and I got a call at it was right at midnight, and it was about a facility patient that was having loose stools, and so they had some loperamide there, but they didn't have an order for it, so it just they were like, she's fine. Other than that, she's just had these two loose stools, and we'd like her to stop. And
Wow.
so I called, got an order for that, called it to them, and didn't even need to make a visit, and that was the only thing I did all night. That doesn't always happen. There's times when I'm out and I'm driving and doing things, but for a typical nurse in hospice, a case manager, so those are the RNs who are the ones that are, the primary nurse for that particular patient. And so we start off with a morning call where we, do a 15-minute phone call. Everybody just kind of calls in and, hey, here's anything, new that's going on, or, maybe I'm going to be out of commission for these couple of hours, or I've got this meeting or whatever. So then it's just starting to go and see the patients. And so that usually looks like, 45 minutes to an hour with each patient and family.
Wow.
And that's doing an assessment, getting vitals, listening to lungs and bowel sounds, and, checking for edema and things like that, and reviewing medications, finding out, have there been any falls? Have there been any changes? What kind of symptoms are you having? Really looking at that whole assessment, and also any needs. Maybe there are some DME needs that are there, or some psychosocial things where you need to involve more of the team, getting maybe getting the chaplain or the social worker involved, and really making sure that everything is holistic. And, in hospice, the patient and the family are the unit of care.
Hmm.
So it's not just making sure the patient isn't having any pain, but it's educating the family and supporting them as well, because of course, being a caregiver is tough. It's tough when you're getting paid for it, but it's even tougher when you're at home with them 24/7 and sometimes don't have much of a break. Uh, and in the meantime, you're maybe getting calls from patients and families who are calling in and having changes or needs, and making sure that, prescriptions are refilled. And so our team is really good about being proactive with those kind of things. And the families knowing that, okay, we're going to look at supplies and meds during every visit and make sure that you're not running low, so that at 5:05 on a Friday, we're not getting calls about needing supplies or needing medications that somebody's going to be out of. They're really good at that. And I know from previous hospice experience that is a godsend,
Hmm.
especially to the on-call staff, because it's, when you're trying to do those kind of things, and that takes you away from maybe other needs that are more important, really, but maybe not quite as urgent. And just knowing, when the nurse and the team knows the patient and the family a little more, it's just easier for them to be able to manage those kind of things. So usually it's 4 to 6 patients a day, depending on drive time and things like that. And, sometimes that sounds like not a lot, and sometimes it's not, depending on where they are. And other times that's, a full 8-hour shift plus plus.
Right. Jenny, people on hospice can still get medicine. I mean, that's just, I think
Yes.
that might be another misconception. They think, well, we're
Yes.
just going to give you water and, well, maybe not even water. You got to
Right.
sit there and,
Right.
pass away. So that's not,
Hmm.
it's still
No.
very much care.
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely. It's just, and honestly, we still have people who are full codes on hospice. That's
Okay,
another
good.
kind of
Yes.
thing is,
Hmm.
we got to be a DNR. No, you don't, because some people aren't, they're just not there yet. One of the big things about hospice is we meet people where they are. And so it seems like, well, if you know you're dying, why would you want CPR? Well, sometimes we get people, ideally, so let me just back up a little bit. to qualify for hospice, because I think this is one of the first misconceptions.
Hmm.
To qualify for hospice, you don't have to be like dying today or tomorrow. You have to have a physician say that if your disease runs its normal course, you have a life expectancy of 6 months or less.
Okay.
So that's a lot of people. Because none of us have an expiration date, I mean, we don't know when that is. So, there are some people who, yes, they qualify for that and maybe they continue to meet that criteria for 2 years.
Wow.
And so they, can continue to stay on hospice as long as, as long as that criteria continues to be met. So some people maybe they think, well, of course, like I've got cancer, but of course if my heart stops or I stop breathing, well, of course I want you to restart it, because that doesn't seem like the natural progression in their mind, maybe
Hmm.
at that time. And so the goal is to, by the time somebody is getting closer to death, to have that so that it is going to be a DNR, so that it is going to be able to be a peaceful death. But again, that's something that doesn't always happen. And, in that situation, then we tell them, okay, if that's what you want, then you need to call 911 then, because we're not going to get there in time to do
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
But that's few and far between. But as far as treatment, even if somebody has a DNR, that doesn't mean do not treat. That just means don't resuscitate, So everything from a comfort standpoint, we're still going to be doing. And people, as long as they want to, eat and drink and all of
Hmm.
that, then absolutely do that. But that's the medication part is something where people get a little,
Right.
confused about that too. There's a lot of misconceptions in terms of end of life medication and especially morphine. Morphine is like the thing that people hear and they're like, "Oh, I don't want morphine." Because it's seen as a last, once they start the morphine, then
Right.
that's it.
Hmm.
And there was some of that, and that's just because people's pain wasn't treated well until then,
Right. Hmm.
until close to death. And then it's like, okay, well, now we don't have to worry about you getting addicted, which we don't have to worry about anyway when somebody is dying.
Right.
But now it's, we treat pain like from the beginning, if there's pain, and some people don't ever have pain. Some
Hmm.
people don't ever have shortness of breath. And so, not everybody, it's not a one size fits all approach for sure. It's everything is very individualized and it's people are treated to keep them comfortable and that depends on what their goals are too. Because some people would rather be, hey, like I'm in a lot of pain. I don't want to be, maybe my pain's a 10. I want my pain to be a 2. And for some people, that's not realistic
Right.
anyway. But, I want my pain to be as low as possible, even if that means I'm pretty groggy. And then there's others who are like, I can deal with a 5 or 6 if that means I'm able to still be able to talk with my kids and my friends. And so it's just figuring out what people's goals of care are and then helping them achieve that as best as we can.
Thank you so much for explaining all that so well. As you're talking and describing these things, it just makes me wish sometimes that in during life, our regular medical care could be as beautifully tailored as it is at our end of life care,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
think that you guys, you just have such a great way of listening to patients, listening to their families, considering all options, and then
Hmm.
picking options that are best for them. And I applaud you so much, Jenny. I'm going to shift gears here just a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit about your mom and the
Hmm.
story that's kind of transpired since then, because it's such an interesting take. I have talked to so many people who have been inspired to enter medicine because of their family members.
Hmm.
Your mom was a nurse.
Hmm.
You're a nurse. And I think we see what they're doing and we think, wow, I really, really want to do that. And your story takes even more of an interesting turn because at a certain point, your mother passed away suddenly. And that
Hmm.
caused you to realize, hey, what we're doing is an amazing job and we're offering incredible care, but at what cost to us?
Absolutely.
Right. So tell us a little bit about that discovery and then some of the really incredible things that have come out of that.
Yeah, well, thank you. So, yes, my mom and I went to LPN school together, and I graduated from high school in '93. We went to LPN school and graduated together in '94 because she had always wanted to be a nurse, but instead she was a teen mom. And so yeah, we did that, and it was great. We didn't ever actually work together very much, but we did some, and of course we had the same language, and so that was
That's
cool to
fun.
be able
Yeah.
to to talk to each other about things. And she had some health issues, and so she had been on disability for a while, and she was one of those, like so many caregivers, so many people who are drawn to, healthcare and helping professions. She was somebody who would do everything for everybody but herself. And she had an aneurysm, and it was right in the middle of her brain. And she had known that it was there for a while. And like I said, she did have other things going on as well. But she'd finally decided, because she wasn't sure at first, do I want to do anything with it? Because it's kind of risky with where it is. And it was right there at the Circle of Willis. So, yeah. And so, so she finally decided, I think I'm going to go ahead and get it taken care of
Mm.
soon, as soon as all these other things are taken care of that aren't quite as urgent as something getting ready to rupture in the middle of your brain.
Same.
But but it had been so, I don't know. My mom was incredibly tough. She had been sick for a long time and had a lot of things, and she was a very strong-willed, stubborn woman. And when people are sick for so long, or they've had something going for so long, you're like, well, yeah, that's there, and we know that it could do something, but no, come on. I mean, it's been here forever. And so, yeah, and it did rupture. And I went over and found her. I was going to be taking her to the doctor, and I was mad because she was running late, like she was always running
Oh,
late. And
gosh.
and I walk in, and like the house is quiet, and I'm like, hello, come on, and nothing.
Mm.
And yeah, and she was agonal breathing in the bathtub. And so about 30 hours later, she passed away at the hospital on hospice, because um, the hospital nurse wasn't quite grasping like the urgency of the situation. I was wanting her to be more comfortable, and she's like, okay, well, we can see about a morphine pump. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Like she's been in pain for like most of her life, and
Hmm.
she's not going to be now. And she's like, okay. So then she comes back. She's like, well, I put in a referral for that for in the morning. And I'm like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Because there's not
Holy.
an in the morning, And so
Hmm.
finally I was like, So thankfully I had a little bit of pull still in our local hospice. And so I'm like,
Yes.
hey, I need you to get a hold of, So I'm connecting with my friends. One of them was there, and she was able to get a hold of the medical director, and we got things going and got mom comfortable, and she was able to pass peacefully. But I realized after that I just, like, we needed to do something different as healthcare providers, as people who give and give and give.
Hmm.
It's so easy to think, oh, well, I'll get around to taking care of me later. I don't have time for that.
Right.
Or, the old favorite, self-care is selfish. Um, but it's that really made me realize just how much we need to figure out how to be able to meet our own needs. And so that kind of led me on this journey of like, what does that look like? Um, and how can it be done without having to quit work, or, or
Right.
having it feel like another full-time job? Or when you have a busy life, like, how do you
Hmm.
fit that in without feeling guilty, without being exhausted when you're already worn out? How do you stop from just sitting in front of the TV and every night and vegging out? And I mean, and I
Yes.
do some of that too. I definitely don't have it all figured out, but what I do know is that the more that I practice what I preach, the easier it is. And when I do get off track, because I do, I'm human and I'm like I said, I want to do everything.
Yes.
And so when I do that, then I'm able to just rein it back in more quickly and figure out because I put together a process for doing that. And basically it's all about personalizing what self-care looks like for us. So kind of like in hospice where we, tailor
Right.
that to the individual person and meet them where they're at. That's the same way I do with, with myself and with my clients is really figuring out like what do I need most right now and thinking about the things that matter to me because they may be completely different than the things that fill you up.
Absolutely. No, that's so perfect. And thank you for sharing that story about your mom. I think so often people assume that as healthcare professionals, we have everything on lock in our own lives when it comes to healthcare and the healthcare of our family. And we're laughing because it's not true, first of
No,
all.
not at
And
all.
even when you enter the hospital, and this is a place where you can be very comfortable with somebody who is dying, who you love, but you have been around that situation, it's
Hmm.
still very challenging sometimes
Hmm.
for you emotionally, but also the whole process, the whole thing, like you said. Let's talk about your book.
Sure.
Self-care isn't oh my gosh. Self-care isn't selfish.
It's not shellfish either.
Shellfish. It is definitely not shellfish. Self-care isn't selfish. It shares actionable strategies for healthcare providers and for caregivers.
Mhm.
So this is a two-part question. Number one, as a healthcare professional, how would we know when we need your book? How would we know when we need to look at and contact you to talk about some of these things? What would we be looking for in our own lives?
Really, I think it's that feeling like you just don't have enough time, like you can't do enough, like you're always behind,
Mhm.
um, like you're frustrated and don't know why. Or the one that I fall into is, well, as soon as X, then Y, as soon as I get done with this thing, as soon as this, and then I realize like it just keeps on. There's not, it's like a to-do list. Who gets done with their to-do list? I mean, you may knock some things off, but I'm like, "Oh, look at that. I marked 4 things off today. I added 6, but I knocked 4 off."
Right.
And it's like that. It's just when you keep thinking, well, soon and then that's for me, that's a big trigger when I know, okay, like I've got to do something different. And we do have those seasons in our lives. But also, if we're not intentional about it, even when we do have those seasons and then we let off, um, like I know for me, when I get overextended, when I've let go of the self-care a little too long, then I'll think, okay, you know what? I'm just going to keep pushing through this right now. But next week, I'll look and I'm like, okay, this is a big week right now, but I've got Monday and Tuesday where, I've got some space. I can get a bunch of this stuff done almost every time. Monday or Tuesday, one of those days, I'll wake up and I did that this week. I woke up and I was like, my head hurts so bad. Like I felt like I was so hungover. I was not. But I mean, I ended up needing to sleep more. I had to take, my migraine medicine and I'm like, okay, so there goes some of those days. And a big part of that is I know I need massages like every 4 to 6 weeks. That's kind of my sweet spot. It's been since January, just because of life and because of money and because of, all
Yes.
those things. It's like, I'm just going to wait on that just a little bit longer. And my body's going, hey, longer's up.
Yeah. Longer is
So
over.
yes, yes. But it's knowing those kind of things about ourselves. And so back to your, initial question of how would somebody know, part of that too is if you think, okay, I know something needs to be different, but I don't even know where to start,
Mhm.
then, that's a great place to, jump on a free call with me or, pick up my book and I don't know, we're probably going to say something about this at the end, but you can get a free copy of my book on my website,
Fabulous.
which is jennylytle.com, or you can just go to selfcareisn'tselfish.com and get that too. But but yeah, it's just a great place to start. It's a short book. I kept it. I kept it little because, well, partly because I don't have a long attention span. I know you probably can't tell that. But also, the people who really need it aren't people who are going to sit down and read a 300-page book on,
Right.
So it's something where you can read it very quickly. It's probably going to take you 2 or 3 hours if you read it straight through. And if not, it's very easy to, flip through and do little bits at a time.
Absolutely fantastic, Jenny. And of course, you're incredible because that was the part two of my question is where
Oh,
do we go next from here? As we wrap up, it has just been such an incredible conversation. And I feel so motivated. Number one, to go schedule a massage. I'm doing that today. Yeah. That's a
yes.
good idea. But number two, just to listen better and to consider more things. And then to take care of myself as well. So it is
hmm
so important because, like you said, you cannot pour from an empty cup, right? It's just
hmm
not possible. If you had somebody ask you or somebody say, I'm not strong enough for medicine or I'm not strong enough for a field like hospice.
hmm
What would you say to that person?
Mm. There are a lot of people who say, oh, I could never do that. And, I would say it's probably not what you think it is. And it depends on where your passions and your gifts lie.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've done some ER, I've done a little bit of stuff and I liked it, but like I really like the one-on-one, the touchy-feely parts, So if you're somebody, it's what people, oh, I just care too much. I couldn't do that. Well, okay, so I guess I don't care, but I do, that I really do. But it is so important to end up having boundaries and
Yes.
having ways to take care of yourself because it does. It is, compassion fatigue is a real thing. It does get heavy at times and you do get attached to people, I never
Mm-hmm.
want to get to where I don't care.
Yeah.
So, I cry with a lot of my patients and families. And when I get to a point where I'm just like, just another day, then I'm done because I don't want to be that person.
Right.
But it's just being able to get clear on what it is that matters most to you. And I think, if it's something where you're like, I don't know, but check it out. It's if it's something that you feel kind of like, I don't know, maybe there's something there, then look into it. It's not for everybody for sure, but it's definitely a different way of looking at healthcare and it's something too that sometimes people feel like, well, I'm going to lose all of my skills or whatever if I'm
Mm.
doing that. And I mean, there are some things that, that we don't do, obviously, in hospice that we would be doing in a hospital. But I also realized one day because I used to, kind of think, well, that there's so much thought about, people who work in hospitals. When you say you're a nurse, it's like, oh, well, what hospital do you work at? It's like,
Right.
most nurses don't work in hospitals, but that's okay. But it's when you're out with somebody in the middle of the night, you have what's available in the home
Mm-hmm.
and, maybe some a catheter and some other random supplies, basic wound care supplies in your car, and there's something going on. I mean, you've got to pull out the MacGyver stops and
Yep.
figure out, how am I going to manage this? And but that's one of the things that's kind of fun about it if you're wired that way.
The creativity there, absolutely. And I'm so glad you mentioned just knowing your own innate gifts too,
hmm
because
hmm
I do think, and of course I laughed hysterically when you said, well, I must not care, because what like that's just the perfect answer to when people ask you about anyway.
Right.
Knowing your innate gifts will it's not to say that if you don't have those gifts, you won't do well in hospice, but it
hmm
just, God, it makes the road so much easier. If you are the person that can emote with a patient, that can
hmm
sit there and feel what they're feeling, because the good Lord knows when I am that patient, I would like to have a provider sitting there with me saying, I understand.
hmm
I feel that, I don't want somebody who's been hardened by their life in medicine, just kind of staring at me, watching me cry,
Right.
So,
Right.
I so appreciate it. Jenny, you mentioned a couple places where we could find you. Where can we find you if we are looking for more information or just to learn more about this incredible field?
Sure. So if you go to jennylytle.com, that's where everything's attached there, but you can get the free copy of my book. You can see other things that I have to offer. I do some blogging. I've got a newsletter that actually comes out 3 times a week that that just
Fabulous.
really goes into very simple, practical tips for being able to fit in self-care and stress relief into busy lives.
Fabulous. Jenny, thank you so much. Thank you for spending the time and sharing your story with us on Shadow Me Next. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I appreciate the time.
Thank you so very much for listening to this episode of Shadow Me Next. If you liked this episode, or if you think it could be useful for a friend, please subscribe and invite them to join us next Monday. As always, if you have any questions, let me know on Facebook or Instagram. Access you want, stories you need. You're always invited to Shadow Me Next.